So I'm sure there are those considering the upgrade from the iPad Air 4 to the iPad Air 6, or there may be some cross-shopping between these, and so I thought I'd compare them and basically illustrate how similar these models are. Beginning with the design, you really can't tell this apart from the iPad Air 4, and what's funny is that the Air 4 in the first place looks identical to the 2018 iPad Pro. Wow, they've been reusing the same design for that long, but I can't blame Apple for doing that because it's a practical design that works. The flat edges are easy to grip onto and of course helps accommodate the Apple Pencil, and it would be nice if the bezels got thinner with the Air 6, but ultimately they serve a purpose. You can still place your finger somewhere when holding the iPad. The display also similarly has no upgrades over the iPad Air 4 and 5, but it does the job for the most part. It's 10.9 inches LCD, has a resolution of 2360 by 1640 with 500 nits of brightness. It's also laminated with P3 support and has True Tone and an anti-reflective coating. Now I know some techies are gonna need that buttery smooth 120Hz the pros offer, but I'll be honest guys, iPadOS animations are fluid enough where I don't notice the lack of 120Hz. Brightness is also completely fine for indoor usage, and the Apple Pencil experience is unaffected by the lack of 120Hz. It's a laminated panel of course, so these iPads are still much better for note-taking compared to the base iPads. You know what else would be better for me? If you subscribe to the channel, of course. Haha, what a horrible segue. Anyways, I would greatly appreciate it. It would bring you the latest about Apple right to your subscription box, so please consider it, it would be appreciated. But let's move on to accessories now, because there's one small difference between these iPads, and that's the pencil situation. So the Air 4 supports a 2nd gen pencil, whereas the M2 Air supports the new Apple Pencil Pro. However, both do support the cheaper USB-C pencil. Now, whilst it is a shame old iPads don't support the Apple Pencil Pro, I find it more annoying the M2 model does not support the older Gen 2 pencil. Now, I understand that Apple moving the camera to the landscape position might have broken support, but for those coming from older iPads considering the upgrades, it certainly is annoying. You have to buy both the new iPads and spend another $129 on that fancy Pro Pencil, even if your Gen 2 pencil works completely fine. Yes, you can get the USB-C pencil that's cheaper, but remember that's a downgrade over the 2nd gen, so this is a negative for the iPad Air 6 regardless. But of course, if you're new to the iPads, this is not a problem and you would be happy with either pencil. Pencil Pro does have some cool upgrades like a squeeze gesture to bring up a tool palette, a gyroscope that allows you to rotate the pencil for brush tools, haptic feedback and also Find My support. But the 2nd gen pencil also is similarly great for artwork and note-taking and can be found for much less. But thankfully both of these do support the old Magic Keyboard, and it's a must-have for anyone wanting their iPad to be a laptop replacement. I know some might be put off by the retail price. I know it's very expensive, but because it's been around for a few years, you can find this for much less from third parties. I've seen it for as low as $150, which is an incredible price for how good this keyboard is. Now it is weird the base iPad and the Pro iPad get keyboards with a function row, and this doesn't, but I still prefer the floating design of the iPad Air's Magic Keyboards compared to the standard design the Magic Keyboard Folio has on the iPad 10. Performance-wise, we have A14 in the Air 4 with 4GB of RAM, identical to the iPad 10 by the way, and we have M2 with 8GB of RAM in the Air 6. And frankly, I was surprised by this because M2 is nearly 2 years old, and with the iPad Pro getting M4 that could have paved way for the Air to get M3, but I guess they're phasing out chips based on that flawed M3B process, and so they've stuck with the M2. Now this is still a perfectly fine chipset and it gives you access to Pro apps, which of course the iPad Air 4 misses out on. However, do remember that this only applies to Apple's Pro apps. You can still use Procreate and LumaFusion on the Air 4, and it does handle them pretty well to be honest. And if I'm being honest, for regular iPad usage, the A14 model is still more than fine, so make sure you know you will take advantage of the performance the M2 offers. If you're a student or you're just browsing the web and consuming content, the iPad Air 4 is still a great iPad. Now yes, I'm aware the M2 Air being the newer product is going to get longer support, but also access to features like Stage Manager, which of course the A14 model does miss out on. But in terms of iPadOS updates, because A14 is still used in the iPad 10 and it's powerful enough for most people's needs, this old Air should still get another 3 to 5 years of updates. Battery life is surprisingly worse on the newer M2. I did notice the same with the M1, maybe it's the M series chipsets using a little more power, but for most people's needs, these iPads are both fine endurance-wise at the end of the day. The Air 6 does have a fast USB-C port, and while it doesn't offer Thunderbolt speeds, it can transfer data up to 10 gigabits per second, which is very solid, and so transfer speed should be completely fine, and it does support displays up to 6K resolution. Touching on the cameras, the rear camera once again is the same on both models, and I was certainly surprised Apple did not bother to add a flash on the back of the Air because the minis had one for years. But anyways, the camera here is fine. Apple does recommend you to add footage you record on the iPad to your Final Cut timeline, but please do not do this. Whilst it's not the worst sensor in the world, the rear camera on these iPads should really only be used in a pinch for things like scanning documents. The front-facing camera on the Air 6, however, is a massive upgrade for video calls since it does have center stage, and also it's now in a better position on the Air 6 with it moving to landscape orientation, which I admit is a legit upgrade. Speakers and mic-wise, there's really no difference between these iPads. They're both very solid. The Air models don't feature quad speakers like the iPad Pros, but it does surprisingly get close with 2 less speakers, and because it's a stereo pair, they're great for watching movies with. Mics have also been great for calls. Moving to biometrics, say with me guys, the M2 Air is the same as the Air 4 in this aspect as well. Who figured? Jokes aside, I do actually prefer Touch ID compared to Face ID on the iPad Pro because I often manage to block the Face ID module when holding the Pro models, and so I find it much easier to press the lock button and boom, the iPad instantly unlocks. It's very reliable. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity have also been upgraded on the M2 Air, but there's really not a massive difference when it comes to connectivity. Now, I do want to finally mention, yes, I'm aware the Air 6 has one big upgrade, which is double the base storage. It starts at 128 gigs now and also maxes out at 1 terabytes if you have overkill storage needs. But as a rebuttal, I would say that if your needs are basic, 64 gigs on the older Air is actually manageable. I can certainly make do with it, but I won't downplay the storage upgrade, it certainly was needed. So overall, you would probably expect me to say the upgrade from the Air 4 to the Air 6 is absolutely worth it, but it depends. If you really want to push your iPad for your creative workflow, then you could justify it because the M series chipset is a genuine upgrade, but I will mention the very similar M1 iPad Air is often on discount for $399, and so you can get that instead. Also, the M1 iPad Pro is on the refurbished store, and that does offer quad speakers, Face ID, which of course some might prefer, and 120Hz for less than the M2 iPad Air, so you can consider that as well. However, if your usage is very basic and you just do iPad things like emailing, note-taking, watching TV shows and movies, and the occasional web browsing, then there's really no point in upgrading. The Air 4 still does that very well, and you're not going to see much of a difference with the iPad Air 6. And the same advice applies for this cross-shopping between these. Save your cash and go with the Air 4 if your usage is basic, but of course, if you know you're going to push your iPad and do layered artwork, for example, or video editing, get the M1 or the M2 iPad Air. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.